Your emotions are not happening to you. You're creating them. And here's the disturbing reality: neuroscientist Lisa Feldman Barrett proved that emotions are not hardwired reactions but constructed predictions your brain makes based on past experience, which means you've been unconsciously training yourself to feel anxious, angry, and overwhelmed for years. You're not emotionally broken. You're emotionally conditioned. By the end of this video, I'll reveal the exact neurological technique that lets you reconstruct your emotional responses in real time. But first, you need to see what emotional reactivity is stealing from your life. Let me show you what's happening right now. Someone criticizes you. Your chest tightens. Your face flushes. You feel anger rising. And you think that's just how you feel. That it's automatic, beyond your control. But it's not. In the microsecond before you felt anger, your brain scanned your past experiences, found a similar pattern, and predicted this means threat. Then it created the physiological response we call anger. And you obeyed it. You snapped. You defended. You attacked. Not because you had to, but because you didn't know you had a choice. Here's what nobody tells you about emotions. They're not facts. They're interpretations. Two people experience the same event. One feels devastated. One feels liberated. Same event. Different emotion. Because emotion is not what happens to you. It's what your brain decides the event means based on your history, your beliefs, and your current state. And if you don't understand this, you're a passenger in your own life. You're being driven by feelings you think you can't control. But you can. You just don't know how yet. Now here's the brutal part. Most people are emotionally illiterate. They can't name what they're feeling beyond good or bad. And when you can't name it, you can't tame it. So you're at the mercy of vague discomfort that controls your decisions. You avoid opportunities because you feel off. You sabotage relationships because you feel weird. You quit projects because you feel stuck. But those aren't emotions. Those are labels your brain uses when it doesn't have the vocabulary to process what's actually happening. And that lack of vocabulary is costing you everything. Let me tell you what emotional reactivity costs you. First, relationships. You say things in anger you can't take back. Second, opportunities. You let fear make decisions that keep you small. Third, health. Chronic emotional dysregulation floods your body with cortisol and destroys your immune system. Fourth, identity. You start to see yourself as just an emotional person instead of someone who can choose their response. And that identity becomes a cage. Because if you're just emotional, you're absolved of responsibility. And without responsibility, there's no growth. Here's what's actually happening in your brain. Your amygdala is designed to detect threats, but it's not very smart. It can't tell the difference between a lion and a difficult email, so it treats both as danger. And when it senses danger, it triggers your fight-flight-freeze response. Your heart races. Your thinking narrows. Your body prepares for battle. And in that state, you're not accessing your prefrontal cortex. You're not being rational. You're being reactive. And reactivity destroys what rationality builds. Now here's the shift that changes everything. Emotional mastery is not about suppressing feelings. It's about creating space between stimulus and response. Viktor Frankl said it, between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Most people have no space. Something happens, they react instantly. But elite performers have trained themselves to insert a pause. A moment of awareness, and in that moment, they choose. Here's the framework. Emotions have 3 stages: trigger, sensation, story. The trigger is the external event. The sensation is the physical feeling in your body. The story is the meaning you assign to the sensation. Most people skip straight from trigger to story. He criticized me becomes I'm not good enough in a nanosecond. But if you learn to catch the sensation before the story, you can choose a different narrative, and a different narrative creates a different emotion. Let me show you what this looks like. Someone says something that normally triggers you. You feel heat in your chest, tightness in your throat. That's the sensation. Now, most people would immediately think they're attacking me and feel anger. But if you pause and just observe the sensation without labeling it, something shifts. You realize it's just physical energy, no inherent meaning. And you can channel that energy differently. Into curiosity. Why did they say that? Into compassion. They must be struggling. into action. How do I respond productively? But here's the trap. Most people think emotional mastery means becoming emotionless, stoic, detached. But that's suppression, not mastery. Suppression is denying the emotion. Mastery is feeling it fully without being controlled by it. You can feel anger and not lash out. You can feel fear and still move forward. You can feel sadness and not collapse. The emotion is present, but it's not in charge. You are. Here's the psychology. Emotions are data. They're signals from your nervous system telling you something needs attention. Fear says there might be danger. Anger says a boundary was crossed. Sadness says something matters to you. But most people treat emotions like commands. Fear says run, and they run. Anger says attack, and they attack. But emotions aren't commands. They're information. And information is only useful if you interpret it correctly. Now here's where it gets interesting. Your emotional capacity is like a container. Some people have small containers. They overflow easily. A minor inconvenience sends them into a spiral. Other people have large containers. They can hold intense emotion without losing control. And the size of your container is not fixed. It's trainable. You expand it by exposing yourself to emotional intensity in controlled doses and practicing regulation. This is emotional strength training. Here's the neuroscience. When you sit with an uncomfortable emotion without reacting, you're strengthening your prefrontal cortex. You're teaching your brain that emotions are not emergencies, that you can experience them without obeying them. And the more you practice this, the less reactive you become. Your amygdala still fires, but your prefrontal cortex overrides it faster. You still feel the emotion, but you don't act on it impulsively. You respond deliberately. Let me give you the protocol. Step 1, name it. When you feel an emotion rising, label it specifically. Not I feel bad, but I feel anxious about this presentation. Labeling activates your prefrontal cortex and reduces amygdala activity. This is called effect labeling, and it's scientifically proven to reduce emotional intensity. Step 2, locate it. Where do you feel it in your body? Chest, stomach, throat? This shifts you from thinking about the emotion to observing it. Step 3, breathe into it. Deep breaths to the location of the sensation. You're regulating your nervous system. Here's what happens when you do this. The emotion doesn't disappear, but it loses its grip. It becomes something you're experiencing instead of something that's consuming you. And in that shift, you create the space to choose. Do I want to act on this? Or do I want to respond differently? And that choice is power, because reactivity is weakness. Response is strength. But here's the part most people skip. You can't practice this in the middle of a crisis. You have to train when the stakes are low. You practice observing emotions during minor irritations. Someone cuts you off in traffic. You feel annoyance. Instead of cursing, you pause. You name it. I feel irritation. You locate it. Tension in my jaw. You breathe. The emotion passes. You've just trained your nervous system. And when the high-stakes moment comes, your brain defaults to the pattern you've practiced. Here's what elite performers understand. They don't avoid difficult emotions. They metabolize them. They sit with discomfort until it transforms into insight. Most people run from pain through distraction, scrolling, eating, drinking, anything to not feel. But avoidance doesn't eliminate the emotion, it just postpones it. And postponed emotions compound. They grow in the dark. But when you face them, when you sit with them, they lose their power. They become just sensations. Temporary, manageable, human. Now here's the secret method I promised you. It's called emotional alchemy. You take the raw energy of a negative emotion and transmute it into fuel for productive action. You're angry? Don't suppress it. Channel it into the workout, into the work, into the conversation you've been avoiding. You're anxious? Don't numb it. Use it as activation energy. The same physiological arousal that creates anxiety creates excitement. Your body doesn't know the difference. Your mind assigns the label. So relabel it. Here's how this works. You're about to do something scary. Your heart is racing. Your palms are sweating. Your mind says I'm anxious. But you intervene. You say I'm excited. Same sensation, different label. And the label changes everything. Because anxiety makes you want to retreat. Excitement makes you want to engage. You've just reframed the same physiological state from threat to challenge. And challenge is something you rise to meet. But here's the trap. Most people try to logic their way out of emotions. I shouldn't feel this way. This is irrational. I need to calm down. But you can't think your way out of an emotion, because emotions are physiological. They're in your body, not just your mind. So you have to regulate through the body. Movement, breath, sensation. These are the tools that actually work. Thinking about the emotion just keeps you stuck in your head while your body stays activated. Here's the identity shift you need. You're not someone who's controlled by emotions. You're someone who's learning to work with them. Emotions are not your enemy. They're not proof you're broken. They're part of being human. The goal is not to eliminate them. It's to develop the capacity to feel them fully without being hijacked by them. And that capacity is built through practice, through repetition, through deliberately choosing response over reaction. Let me show you what happens when you don't master your emotions. You stay stuck in patterns you hate. You blow up relationships. You sabotage opportunities. You make decisions from fear, anger, or desperation. And you wake up one day and realize your entire life has been shaped by unprocessed emotion. You didn't choose your career. Your anxiety did. You didn't choose your relationships. Your fear of abandonment did. You didn't choose your lifestyle. Your shame did. You've been a puppet, and your emotions have been pulling the strings. Here's the truth. Every moment you're emotionally reactive is a moment you're not in control of your life. You're handing the steering wheel to whatever you're feeling. And feelings are terrible drivers. They don't see the long term. They don't weigh consequences. They just want relief. And relief-seeking behavior is what keeps you stuck. You feel bad, you eat. You feel anxious, you scroll. You feel lonely, you text the ex. You're not solving anything. You're just numbing. And numbing is not living. Here's what happens when you master your emotions. You become unshakable. Not because you don't feel, but because you don't react. Someone tries to provoke you. You feel the impulse to engage. But you pause. You breathe. You choose not to, and you walk away with your peace intact. Something triggers your fear. You feel it rising, but instead of avoiding, you move forward anyway, because you've learned that fear is just sensation, and sensation can't stop you unless you let it. Now here's the protocol for today. The next time you feel a strong emotion, you're going to interrupt the automatic reaction. You're going to pause for 5 seconds. In those 5 seconds, you're going to name the emotion specifically. You're going to locate where you feel it in your body. You're going to take 3 deep breaths. And then you're going to ask yourself one question. What response aligns with who I want to be? Not, what do I feel like doing? But what does the best version of me do here? Here's what happens when you do this consistently. You start to trust yourself, because you're no longer at the mercy of your emotional weather. You still feel storms, but you're not capsized by them. You ride them out. You stay anchored. And over time, the storms become less intense, not because life gets easier, but because you get stronger. Your emotional container expands, your regulation improves, your reactivity decreases, and you become someone who can handle anything. But here's the final truth. Emotional mastery is not a destination, it's a practice. You don't master your emotions once and never struggle again. You practice every single day. Every trigger is an opportunity to choose differently. Every uncomfortable feeling is a chance to sit with it instead of running. Every impulse is a moment to pause instead of react. And the more you practice, the more automatic it becomes, until choosing your response is just who you are. So here's what you're committing to right now. You're committing to 5 seconds. The next time an emotion tries to control you, you're giving yourself 5 seconds to pause, to breathe, to choose. 5 seconds between stimulus and response. 5 seconds where your power lives. 5 seconds that separate reactive people from masters. And those 5 seconds will change your life, not because the emotions stop coming, but because you stop letting them decide. Master your emotions, or they'll master you. The choice is yours, and it starts in the next 5 seconds.